Henrietta, our daughter-in-law, loudly said that elderly folks like us, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party. We were shocked by her audacity and couldn't find words to respond. I had kept silent for our eldest son Warren's sake. But Henrietta's disrespectful attitude reached my limit. My husband Reagan and I exchanged glances, nodded in agreement, and told Henrietta that we understood. Satisfied, she smiled and went back to Warren. I am Bridget, 73 years old, and Warren is our son with Reagan. Warren was always quiet but started to assert himself in college. He introduced us to the woman he was seriously dating, and we happily consented to their marriage. Around 3 years into their marriage, during Christmas, Warren and his wife were coming home for the first time. I was excited to spend time with Henrietta. When they arrived, Henrietta initially seemed shy but gradually relaxed. As it got dark, I stood up to prepare dinner, and Henrietta offered to help in the kitchen. While we were in the kitchen, an unfamiliar voice, lower and harsher than usual, said, "It's cold. This house is too cold." I turned towards Henrietta in disbelief, and she was rubbing her hands together with discontent. In an unhappy tone, she expressed her dislike for old houses and complained about Warren insisting they come. Stunned, I was speechless as Henrietta vented her bad mood at me. She even made a disparaging comment, suggesting my appearance was all an act to get married. "I'm tired of waiting. Hurry up and get ready." "I'm hungry," said Henrietta, seemingly annoyed by my stunned silence. She gestured towards the stove and spoke dismissively. I hurried to obey, probably more shaken than I realized. Once I started moving, Henrietta did nothing but dictate, not lifting a finger to help. She complained about everything, criticized my methods, yet did nothing herself. By the time the preparations were done, and it was just a matter of serving the food, Henrietta suddenly became active, charming Reagan and Warren, and blushing at their praise. It was then I finally understood this was Henrietta's true nature. 10 years later, Warren and his wife were returning for a visit. Henrietta had shown her true colors many times, but only in my presence. She never behaved that way in front of Reagan or Warren. I had kept silent, thinking it might be a misunderstanding, but the same things happened every time they visited, confirming my suspicions. Hearing they were coming back, I felt a bit downhearted. While planning to avoid being alone with Henrietta as much as possible, the doorbell rang. Sighing, I opened the door to find Warren standing alone. Surprised not to see Henrietta, I involuntarily looked around for her. Warren, noticing my reaction, spoke with a hint of apology. "Sorry, Mom. Henrietta had some urgent work and will join us later. She said it's okay to go ahead with the grave visit without her." It seemed Henrietta wouldn't be joining until her work was finished, and I felt a sense of relief at the thought of not having to witness Henrietta's behavior, even for a little while. I welcomed Warren into the house, and Reagan, who was in the living room, noticed Henrietta's absence and asked about her. While preparing tea, I found myself sighing deeply without realizing it. We decided to relax for the day and postpone the grave visit to the next day. When Warren informed Henrietta, she responded, "Understood, but I still can't finish my work and come over, so please apologize to the others for me." Reagan laughed it off as unavoidable, but I couldn't help feeling that Henrietta just didn't want to attend the grave visit. However, I couldn't voice such thoughts, so I just said not to worry about it, and we spent the day uneventfully. The next day, after finishing visiting the grave and relaxing at home, Henrietta called, saying, "Finally finished with work, so I'll be heading over tonight." The timing of her call right after the grave visit seemed a bit off to Reagan and Warren too, hastening my suspicion. That evening, just as we were about to have dinner, Henrietta arrived. She appeared a bit sweaty and out of breath, as if she had rushed. I frowned involuntarily, but Reagan and Warren were so pleased to see her that I decided not to say anything. Henrietta, having been freed from work, was told to take a shower first while dinner was being prepared. She replied somewhat apologetically. When she emerged from the bathroom at dinner time, she muttered upon seeing the food on the tray, "Sandwiches, that's it? After a hot day at the grave, I'm tired of eating this." I managed to avoid going to someone else's grave in this heat, and all I get is a simple meal. Henrietta tied up her hair and walked towards the living room. I felt angry but couldn't find the words to confront her. In the living room, she instantly started chatting happily with Regan, leaving me silently frustrated. Another 10 years passed, and Warren decided to move from his apartment to a house. After discussing it with Henrietta, they decided to pay as much down payment as possible themselves, but asked us for a little help with the shortfall. We couldn't refuse our dear Warren's request, so we immediately agreed and transferred the needed amount. Soon after, Warren informed us that their new house was built, and they planned the housewarming party with both families. I hadn't seen Henrietta's parents since the wedding, so I eagerly agreed to attend, considering everything that had happened. Warren was delighted with my response and immediately shared the news with Henrietta, who I imagined was on the other end of the phone. Thus, we were set to attend the housewarming party next month. A few days after this was decided, Henrietta unexpectedly visited alone. I was surprised by her unannounced visit and opened the door without realizing it was her. Looking up, I saw Henrietta with an unhappy expression, and I was taken aback. "I'll come in." Henrietta quickly checked for keys in the entrance and pushed past me to enter the house. Her arrogant behavior continued as she walked into the living room, probably because she noticed that Regan's keys weren't in the entrance. Indeed, Regan was out for his daily walk and wouldn't be back for a while. Taking advantage of this, Henrietta had barged into our home. Feeling trapped, I followed her into the living room where she waited for me without sitting down. Before I could even close the door, Henrietta glared at me and said, "Bridget, you're planning to come to the housewarming party. It's a nuisance, so can you please not come?" Surprised, I responded, "What are you suddenly talking about? Regan wasn't there," so Henrietta, crossing her arms, started speaking in a high-handed manner. "You're planning to tattle to my parents about me, aren't you?" Henrietta glared at me with evident disgust, clearly not wanting her parents to know about her behavior. She must have specifically chosen a time when Warren was working, and she had a day off, knowing about Regan's routine walk, and had timed her visit accordingly. Henrietta was cunning indeed. Calmly, I replied, "I had no such intention, but now that you mention it, it might not be a bad idea." Henrietta frowned in annoyance, saying, "It's no joke. I married Warren because he's good-looking and earns decently. I don't want to deal with annoying relatives revealing." Henrietta's expression froze when she realized I had caught on to the true reason for marrying Warren. As I worried about her strange behavior, the living room door opened behind me. Turning around, I saw Regan, who looked surprised as he gazed at Henrietta, realizing that her conversation with me had been overheard. Henrietta clicked her tongue but decided to brazen it out, telling us the real reason. "Elderly folks like you, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party." We were astounded by her audacity, at a loss for words. I reached my limit with Henrietta, daring to say such things even in Warren's absence. I had kept silent for Warren's sake until now, but I could no longer overlook such behavior. My husband Regan seemed to share my sentiment. At her utterly disrespectful attitude, we exchanged glances, nodded in agreement, and said to Henrietta, "Understood." Satisfied, she smiled and went back to Warren. Left behind, we felt suddenly very tired and sat down on the sofa. On the day of the housewarming party, we didn't go to Warren and his wife's home. We hadn't told Warren anything about the incident with Henrietta. Naturally, he must have thought we were coming. By now, Warren and his wife might be panicking, sipping coffee with Regan at a cafe. I pondered this. Then Regan's mobile phone rang. He got up, answered the call, and stepped out of the cafe. I quickly paid the bill and followed him out, getting into the car. Regan switched the phone to speaker mode so I could hear Warren's voice too. "Dad, something strange is happening. All my relatives have suddenly got other plans, and you and Mom haven't arrived yet. Even Henrietta's relatives are canceling one after another. What's going on?" Feeling guilty about Warren's anxious tone but deciding to play dumb, we exchanged glances. Who knows what Henrietta's saying? Reagan asked, sounding casual. His acting was so natural that it surprised me. Noticing my reaction, Regan winked and gestured to keep it a secret. I had to stifle a laugh, covering my mouth. Henrietta is also confused. Oh, another call's coming in. I'll call back later. Be safe, coming over. Warren still seemed to expect our visit, making me feel remorseful. But I convinced myself it was necessary to get back at Henrietta. Then my mobile phone rang. It was a relative who was supposed to attend today's party. Feeling sorry but chatting for a bit, I was engaged in a long conversation with a talkative relative when Regan's phone rang again. It was Warren. Regan switched to speaker mode and answered, "Dad, I just spoke to Henrietta's mom. What's going on? If you can still come, please do right away." Warren's voice, sounding close to tears, made me feel a tightness in my chest. Regan looked at me with furrowed brows. After I nodded at Regan, he reassured Warren. "Understood. We'll be right there. Calm down." With that, Warren, sounding relieved, hung up. We who were at a cafe near Warren's new home drove towards his place. Upon arriving and ringing the doorbell, Warren rushed out to greet us. Behind him, Henrietta glared at us with furious eyes. Once inside, Warren ushered us to the living room, waiting for us to sit on the sofa. Eagerly, he asked, "I didn't expect you to arrive so soon. Where were you? What's going on?" All our relatives are angry. Henrietta's relatives are apologizing, and I have no idea what's happening. Calm down, Warren. First of all, congratulations on your new home. I'll explain everything now, I said to calm him down. I turned to Henrietta, who was silently sitting. You know why we're the only ones here, don't you, Henrietta? What do you mean? Henrietta feigned ignorance, prompting me to sigh lightly before starting. It seems you don't want us here, but given the current situation, your worries are gone, aren't they? Didn't want us here. What does that mean? Warren sounded confused. I smiled slightly and continued. Both your relatives and ours know everything now. Unfortunately, your plans have failed. You've already been reprimanded by your relatives, haven't you? A low growl unmistakably from Henrietta was heard. Ignoring this, I continued, looking straight at Henrietta. Given Warren's reaction now, you've been pretending to be good ever since you were dating him. Now that your true nature is exposed, why don't you just accept it? I didn't invite you. Her voice, now much quieter than before, made Warren lean in closer to hear her. She repeated, I didn't invite you. I told you not to come. Why did you come anyway and spread lies among the relatives, framing me? Is that fun for you? Taken aback by her intensity, Warren recoiled. I sighed at Henrietta, still insisting she was the victim. Mobile phones are so handy, aren't they, Henrietta? I nodded at Reagan. He took out his phone, operated it, and then looked at Warren. I just wanted to marry Warren because he's good-looking and earns decently. I don't want to deal with troublesome relatives. Anyway, elderly folks like you, being of a different class, shouldn't come to the housewarming party. Henrietta's words from that day played from Regan's mobile phone. Henrietta turned pale and looked at Warren. After the playback, Warren turned slowly to Henrietta, his mouth agape. Henrietta tried to deny it, but what excuse could she give after that recording? The weather turned bad, so I cut my walk short and came back only to hear this incredible conversation. I couldn't help but record it. Glad it was useful, Regan said regretfully. Warren looked at me for confirmation, and I nodded firmly. I couldn't believe it at first either, Warren, but the truth is there in the recording. Henrietta's true feelings and her last words were said despite my presence. It's hard to escape now. Regan fixed his gaze on Henrietta, questioning how anyone could stay calm knowing she had been deceiving everyone since her dating days with Warren, let alone after their marriage. Seeing his look, Henrietta dropped her shoulders and ceased her struggle. This seemed like an affirmation to Warren, who abruptly stood up and left the house. It happened so suddenly that we couldn't stop him, and although Regan hurried after him, he soon returned. Apparently, Warren had driven off somewhere, leaving his mobile phone behind, making it impossible for us to call him. Henrietta, left behind and surrounded by us, sat trembling and pale, huddled up. As time passed helplessly, Warren eventually returned, holding something in his hand, which he slammed in front of Henrietta, saying quietly, "Sign the divorce papers and leave." Henrietta looked up at Warren, her mouth agape, but Warren repeated himself, took a pen from the holder on the table, and began to fill in his part. After finishing, he forced the pen into Henrietta's hand and tapped on the divorce papers. "Come on, sign, and leave." Overwhelmed, Henrietta, though frightened, filled in her part. She looked at Warren when finished, but he, without making eye contact, was checking for any missing details. Finding no errors, he forcefully made Henrietta stand up and dragged her to the front door. He then pushed Henrietta out of the house, ignoring her attempts to cling to him and throwing her bag outside. "It's late, so I'll submit this tomorrow. Don't ever come back to this property," he said, slamming the door shut and locking it. Henrietta's pleading voice could be heard from outside, but Warren ignored it and turned to apologize to us. "I'm sorry for the trouble. I had no idea she was like that." We could say nothing to his deep apology, just embracing him. Before long, Henrietta's voice faded away. We decided to stay at Warren's new home that night. The next morning, Warren submitted the divorce paper first thing, and his divorce from Henrietta was finalized. Concerned about his heartache, we chose to stay another night. And that evening, with a somewhat calmer Warren, we discussed everything that had happened. As we recounted the past events, Warren listened with clenched fists. Regan, who was also unaware of these details, placed his hand on my shoulder as I spoke. Then we revealed the truth about the current situation. After Henrietta had left, telling us not to come, I learned that Regan had spontaneously recorded the conversation. We decided together to inform Henrietta's parents. When we called and explained the situation, Henrietta's parents, initially in disbelief, changed their attitude and kept apologizing. After hearing the recorded audio, angry about their daughter's misdeeds, they intended to tell the relatives who had planned to attend the housewarming party not to go. After hanging up, we discussed and decided to do the same with our relatives. They too were furious and said they wouldn't attend. That is how the current situation unfolded. Hearing all this, Warren's shoulders drooped again, worried but unable to do anything. We decided to spend another night. The next day, Warren came into the living room, looking relieved, and shared what happened the previous night. He had apparently contacted his former in-laws. Henrietta was now at her parents' home, being disowned and facing eviction. They also planned to bring alimony, which would be imposed on Henrietta as her debt. While Warren felt this was not enough, he seemed more settled than expected. After returning home, we immediately started packing up our old house. Now dated, it was set to be handed over. The house was actually being remodeled for us to live in together. Since Warren was at work during the day, the renovations were to take place. Though costly to modify a newly built home, with some financial gain from the recent events and our help, the decision was made. While waiting for the house's remodeling, we were happily clearing out our old home. I expended $200,000 on Kenny, who didn't even attend my mother's funeral, but unexpectedly flew abroad. What on earth did he do with such a sum? Do you remember that grand piano we had at home? I sold it, man. Coming from a wealthy family sure had its perks. That was a fine piano. I never imagined it would fetch $200,000. It seems Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano at home was his. My condolences. The inheritance rights to the family estate are all mine. However, that piano was originally bought by our grandfather for my brother, and it still belongs to him. My brother, who's always loved the piano and now works as a piano teacher, left it at our family home because it was too big for his house. Given my brother's strong sense of ownership, he would be furious to know that something of his had been sold without his consent. Knowing my brother, simply compensating him won't be enough. When I told Kenny this, he hung up immediately. My name is Rachel Schneider. I'm a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a distinguished lineage that dates back to colonial times and is well known in our community. Moreover, thanks to my late father's successful business, we now own assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was supposed to inherit the family estate. However, he had a girlfriend from a family that also required an heir. Desiring to marry her at all costs, he declared that he would give up all inheritance rights in exchange for not taking over the family responsibilities. This left me with the challenge of needing to find a spouse to continue the family name. Even though I had always wanted to be independent without relying on family wealth, I focused solely on my career. Before I realized it, I found myself in my mid-40s and still single. I needed to find someone, or our family line would end with me. So, I took a leap of faith and attended a singles mixer. That's where I met my current husband, Kenny, surprisingly 10 years younger than me. Yet, at the party, he didn't pay attention to any of the younger women and came straight to me. "Are you sure you want to be with someone as old as me?" I asked him repeatedly, but Kenny looked straight into my eyes and answered, "I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been drawn to older, more grounded women." True to his words, Kenny gave off a gentle, reserved vibe. I felt that he could bring some peace to my assertive family dynamics. As our relationship progressed, there was something I had to tell him. My mother had been bedridden due to illness since last year, and I was taking turns with my sister-in-law, Catherine, to care for her. Wondering how to break the news since we were considering marriage, given our age, I finally told him on our third date. He gladly accepted and even proposed to me, saying he'd like to help with the caregiving. I was deeply touched by his kindness. At least, that's how I felt in the beginning. Kenny works as a daycare teacher. However, months into our marriage, he suddenly wanted to quit his job. When I asked why, he replied with a remorseful look, "Sorry, Rachel. The parents at my daycare are just too demanding and complaining a lot. I can't endure it any longer." Surely, it must have been tough for Kenny, looking so timid. I would have normally said, try a little harder to encourage him. But with him helping with my mom's care now, I couldn't say a word. Plus, I'm 3 months pregnant, and I want to get along well with Kenny for the sake of the baby on the way. I was showing a lenient face, but I soon regretted it. As I came out of the shower and tried to enter the bedroom, I could hear Kenny whispering on the phone. I was shocked at the content of his call. I managed to get married without her finding out I'm unemployed. She totally believed me when I just told her I quit my job, when in reality, I quit like 2 years ago. It sounded like he was talking to one of his buddies from the other end. I faintly heard a male voice say, "Man, you're really something." Well, Rachel's family is pretty wealthy around here. I thought I hit the jackpot when I saw her at that dating event. But then again, given her age, I was probably the only one to approach her. I felt deceived. Was the gentle Kenny I knew all just an act? I wanted to confront him immediately, but thinking of the baby, I couldn't utter a word. Knowing Kenny's true intentions, I lost confidence in our future. Today, Catherine will be taking care of my mom until 5:00 p.m., and then I'll take over. I was pondering whether I should confide in someone about Kenny. That's when my brother's wife, Catherine, spoke to me. "Rachel, you look down. If something's troubling you, please share it with me. She's such a kind person, having taken care of her own mom for years. She's really good with mine too." I opened up to her about Kenny. She listened intently to my story. "It's good you talked. Keeping this to yourself could have been harmful to your unborn child." "Yeah, I'm sorry." "No worries. Talking doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it surely lightens the load. Still, this is quite the situation." Catherine looked really concerned, almost as if it was her own problem. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and without waiting for a response, Kenny entered. Both of us were taken aback, but Kenny acted like nothing was amiss and smiled. "Rachel, I'm going to help with your mom's care from today. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you straining yourself." Kenny was putting on the act of a gentleman in front of me. "Really? Okay, let me show you how to care for her." "No, I'll learn from Catherine. You just rest at home." "Well, my brother's coming home early today, so we won't need her help." Upon hearing that, Catherine looked at me, shaking her head as if to say, "It's okay." She might confront Kenny and get the full story out of him once I'm gone. Thinking that, I decided to leave it to her and head home. But I couldn't help but worry, so I pretended to leave but hid nearby. Catherine tried to start a conversation with Kenny, but he spoke first. "I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house?" He was using the same tone he used on the phone. "Well, my husband's busy and can't make it, and Rachel has her job. But more importantly, why are you asking then?" Kenny exclaimed, "What?" and began to say horrible things to Catherine. "You live in such a wealthy home. You'd have enough money to put your mother-in-law in a care facility, wouldn't you? Or is it something else? Did your husband give up his claim to this family's wealth? So you're trying to curry favor by taking care of her? That must be it. You'd be pretty upset if you married into money and didn't get a piece of the inheritance, wouldn't you? That's just cruel." I was seething with anger at Kenny's harsh words, and my initial instinct was to leave the room. However, just as I was about to, Catherine noticed me and subtly signaled with her eyes for me to stay. Reluctantly, I stayed quiet and observed the unfolding scene. "You had a nerve, didn't you? If so, leave right now. This family's wealth belongs to us, my wife and me, so I'll take care of my mother-in-law by myself from now on." With that attitude from Kenny, Catherine felt it was pointless to say anything more and left the scene. I discreetly stepped outside, concerned about how deeply she must have been hurt and wondering how I could apologize to her. Subsequently, Kenny took charge of caring for Mom all by himself. Although I offered to help, Kenny insisted that I absolutely shouldn't come. He merely explained the basics of caregiving. However, his careless caregiving had tragic consequences, and our mother passed away. The funeral took place at a church where generations of our family had been buried. From the day Mom passed away, Kenny disappeared. Despite my attempts to figure out where he might have gone, I was too occupied with funeral preparations and other arrangements. Relatives and neighbors were puzzled by Kenny's absence. Catherine, crying in front of the altar, apologized for entrusting Kenny with the caregiving. I approached the distraught Catherine, attempting to console her. "Catherine, please don't be so hard on yourself. It's our fault, not yours." "No, Rachel, it's not your fault. But where on earth is that man? I wanted to give him a piece of my mind today, and he vanishes just as Mom passes away." "Exactly. Wasn't Kenny often out even while he was supposed to be caring for Mom? Where was he going?" According to neighbors, Kenny frequently left the house, seemingly not engaged in caregiving at all. They also mentioned a large truck that had come by once. I was curious, but with the funeral going on, I didn't bring it up to anyone. The funeral concluded, and even after 3 days, Kenny hadn't returned. Then, I received a call on my phone from Kenny. "Hey Rachel, I'm currently at a luxury hotel in Europe, the kind I saw on a travel show." Kenny's carefree voice came through. "What, Kenny? You skipped Mom's funeral, and you're doing what now?" I angrily yelled, and an unexpected answer came from Kenny. "I spent $200,000. $200,000? Where'd you get that kind of money? Remember the grand piano at our family home? I sold it, man. It was a good one. Who would have thought it'd go for $200,000? It turned out that Kenny had sold the family's grand piano and was using that money to travel around Europe. The piano, which Mom considered a family heirloom, was indeed worth around $200,000. Apparently, the hotels Kenny booked were all quite luxurious, and he had quickly spent all the money. I never imagined Kenny would stoop to such levels while supposedly taking care of Mom. Our family home boasted tight security, but when it came to family, it was a different story. The truck that had been at our home must have been there to transport the piano. I couldn't fathom why Kenny would do something so selfish. The entire family was concerned about him, especially since he wasn't present at the funeral. Why on earth are you doing something so selfish? Well, you know when you have a kid, you won't have much free time anymore. You have a job, so I guess I got to be the stay-at-home dad. Kenny casually responded. Flabbergasted by his words, I momentarily forgot my anger. While it's good that he wants to take on child rearing, it seems he's intent on leeching off of me. Moreover, it appears Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano was mine. I confronted Kenny, who had unknowingly sold the grand piano and splurged with the money, with the words, my condolences. What do you mean by that? Kenny responded in a dumbfounded voice. I explained the details about the grand piano, emphasizing that it originally belonged to my grandfather, who bought it for my brother. Therefore, the current owner is still my brother. Oh, is that so? You scared me there. It'll be fine if I just apologize to your brother later, right? Kenny seemed to lack any guilt about selling someone else's belongings. However, Kenny has only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he's unaware of my brother's intimidating nature. My brother works as a piano teacher, and ever since he was a child, he loved the piano. He pleaded with our grandfather to buy that specific piano, although there isn't currently space in his house for it, which is why it's at our parents'. Yet, he remains the owner. While working at a piano school, he has also expressed his wish to start his own school using that very piano, as it means more to him than anything else. I can only imagine what kind of punishment he would impose on Kenny after hearing that it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother has a strong personality and despises dishonesty. I continued explaining. Kenny remained silent throughout. Get it? When he finds out you sold his cherished grand piano, mere compensation won't cut it. My brother doesn't settle for compromises either. I wonder what kind of punishment awaits you. With my warning, the phone abruptly hung up. He's probably feeling regretful and is now racking his brains. For now, I called my brother and told him everything about the phone call. Needless to say, he was livid. The next day, Kenny rushed home, entering from the front door. His eyes widened upon seeing everyone in the living room. What's going on? Why is everyone here? I had timed it so that the whole family would gather when Kenny returned home. Of course, my brother and his wife, Catherine, were there too. With a menacing look, my brother said, Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel. What were you thinking, selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family? Visibly nervous, Kenny tried to justify himself. I was just trying to help with the chores around the house out of boredom when I saw the old large grand piano. I believed no one was using it anymore, so you decided to sell it. Kenny responded, Yes, it seemed like a waste just to leave it there. My brother, with a stern expression, asked, Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? As expected, my brother played his part convincingly. Everyone probably knew that Kenny blew all his money on an overseas trip, but my brother aimed to make him confess in front of everyone. Desperate, Kenny must have been thinking of an excuse. He didn't respond immediately and seemed lost in thought. The sales money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. In a flustered manner, Kenny tried to make an excuse, but my brother's anger finally erupted. You're lying. Just how rotten are you? For starters, what's with those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase? Kenny acted as if he'd been struck by lightning, closing his eyes and shrinking back. I'm sorry, I used up all the money. Hearing Kenny's words, all the relatives began murmuring. Everyone knew the value of that grand piano, and they were shocked that he could spend $200,000 on just one overseas trip. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, making eye contact, and said, I think you already know from Rachel, but that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. Are you okay with that? My brother confronted Kenny with immense intensity, almost resembling a mob boss. Normally, this would just be a family dispute, not something to sue over. But my brother likely intimidated Kenny, who was clueless about the law. As my brother expected, Kenny lost his voice and started sweating profusely. Then, with a frightened voice, He looked at me, pleading, "Rachel, please help me. What did he expect me to do? I had nothing to do with this. It's all his doing." When I shot him down, Kenny began saying something ridiculous. "Don't be so cold. I took care of your mom while you were pregnant. I just thought of the trip as a reward for myself after taking care of her. Let's just say we both decided to sell a piano. That way, since we're siblings, it won't be theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded I couldn't close my open mouth. The one who came to my rescue was Catherine. "Enough is enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance and tried to drive me away. What did you say such awful things to my wife too?" "Yes, I didn't want to worry you, so I kept quiet. But this man must have been plotting to secretly sell the piano without letting Rachel and me get close to the family home." Catherine's words made sense to me, recalling that Kenny didn't let me come close to the family home when he said he'd take care of our parents alone. I came to the same conclusion. My brother's anger peaked again. "Listen up. The reason my wife took care of Mom was that she didn't want to go to a facility. My wife had experience caring for her own mother, so she kindly agreed to do it for mine. Money is a later issue. First, apologize to my wife right here, right now." While being grabbed by the collar by my brother Kenny, with tears in his eyes, knelt down in front of Catherine. "I'm so sorry, Catherine." Though Kenny apologized for his insulting behavior towards Catherine, all the relatives looked at him with cold eyes. Then one of the relatives shouted at Kenny, "You better pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible. We can't have a criminal in the family. It'll tarnish the Schneiders' name." Kenny, misunderstanding again, made another odd remark. "Right, we can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep things calm. We'll save money together as a couple and pay back little by little." At Kenny's nonsensical interpretation, even my uncle was left speechless, not knowing how to respond. I felt that no matter what was said, it wouldn't resolve anything, so I decided to fetch something from my room. Ever since the incident on the phone when Kenny was talking with a friend, I've had the business card of a divorce lawyer ready. "Kenny, call this number. I want our relationship to be over. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers," I declared as I handed Kenny the business card. His face turned pale, and he stammered, "Why? We're about to have a baby, and yet, why are you doing this?" At that moment, I revealed to everyone present what Kenny had been talking about with his friend on the phone. "Wait, you heard that? It was just a joke." Kenny attempted to excuse himself, but I retorted, "You think that excuse will fly? I've known from the start that you approached me for my inheritance." Everyone around was giving Kenny a cold stare. Realizing there was no way out, Kenny retorted with a defiant attitude, "Darn, I thought I was going to get close to $9 million after we got married. I researched how much your mother left you." This sudden change in Kenny, who had always seemed so gentle, shocked everyone. Maybe I should have been suspicious of a man I met at a dating event who was 10 years younger. I thought we had married for love, but this hurt me deeply. From now on, Kenny would be a stranger to me and my brother, so naturally, he had to pay back the money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, saying, "I can't do that," but all the relatives present would testify against him, so there was no escaping this. However, I assured him, I won't ask for child support. At least I'm grateful for that. In return, Kenny, you'll have nothing to do with this child. This is my child alone. You can't even claim to be its father. I firmly stated this with my hand on my belly. I can't even see the child. Kenny looked devastated and collapsed. Since the divorce, Kenny had been living in poverty, working odd jobs. One day, my phone rang, and it was Kenny. I didn't want to have anything to do with him, but he kept calling, so I reluctantly answered. "Rachel, please help me," Kenny pleaded in a pitiful voice. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny sold the piano, he had said it was in pristine condition. However, there was a large engraving on the back made by my brother claiming ownership. Probably, Kenny didn't check the back. And he should have gone to a reputable piano buyer. He likely sold it through a shady dealer, lured in by tempting offers like completely free, and now he was facing the consequences. Kenny had to return $200,000 to the buyer, and considering what he owed my brother, it was a substantial amount. Later on, Kenny tried to file for bankruptcy, but my brother and I took legal action and stopped him. Now, Kenny was burdened with even more debt and worked day and night doing manual labor. Eventually, the heirloom grand piano safely returned. Relieved, my brother put a strong lock on the room where the piano was kept, and he even installed a security camera, being super cautious. "No one's going to touch that piano till I start my piano lessons," said my brother, who hadn't changed a bit from when he was a kid, making me chuckle. My brother expressed his wish to start a piano school at our family home. So I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Catherine, my brother's wife, had taken care of our mother, and I felt guilty about inheriting everything by myself. Thanks to my brother agreeing with my decision, it seems we'll continue to have a good relationship with his family in the future. And so I was blessed with a long-awaited baby girl. I feel bad for the relatives who were hoping for an heir, but in today's age, I believe girls tend to cherish their mothers for a longer time. Besides, my mother, in fact, was an only daughter and took in a son-in-law. So if needed, my daughter can do the same. I became a single mom, but Catherine, who's already done with her parenting, is fully supporting me. Ever since I was taking care of my mom, I've truly been indebted to Catherine. My brother said he's going to step in as a father figure for my daughter, and he's really excited about it. Also, my brother and Catherine have 2 adult daughters, and under his influence, who loves the piano, both became kindergarten teachers. Those nieces have also come to adore my daughter. I feel so fortunate to be supported by such a warm family. And with gratitude to those around me, I intend to live strong with my daughter. Jennifer, since you've married into this family, the understanding is that what's yours is also mine, isn't it? It's only natural. I might have spent around $30,000 in Florida, but you'll cover that expense, won't you? Not only do they look down on me, but my mother-in-law and Susan, my sister-in-law, have the audacity to take people's credit cards without permission and use them as they please. It appears they used about $30,000 during their trip to Florida. But is that really my credit card? Did they even bother to check before using it? They probably didn't even confirm whose name was on it. Naturally, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who have been doing whatever they want, should face some painful consequences. It's too late for regrets and apologies. I am Jennifer, 31 years old, working as an office employee. Ryan and I have been married for 3 years, but we don't have any children yet. Recently, after discussing it with Ryan, we fulfilled our wish and bought our own home. We chose a 4-bedroom house so we can welcome children at any time and designed a spacious living room where everyone can gather. We do hope to have 2 or 3 children in the future. Ryan and I dream of building a cheerful home filled with laughter. However, now that we've bought a house, we have to work harder than ever to pay off the mortgage. This inevitably means that we have less time to make children. The reality of having to work to pay off the mortgage and the desire to have children has indeed caused us conflict and urgency. But the magic of the new house seems to purify these troubled feelings. The unique scent of a new house, the whiteness and cleanliness from floor to ceiling, make us proud. This healing space seems to be telling us there's no need to rush. Our journey to pregnancy might be a long one, but since we just started anew, we're going to work together and do our best. It was just after we had renewed our determination that, this new house vibe is really nice. Don't you think? New houses are really the best. Just a few days after moving into our new home, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law started coming to our house almost every day. I understand they want to see their son's or brother's newly purchased house, but when they come every day, it's irritating for both of us. We are utterly troubled by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. If it were just daily visits, it might be tolerable, but this was just the beginning of even worse things to come. One night, while my mother-in-law and sister-in-law continued to do as they pleased in our home, one might think it's a typical family chat. However, this is taking place in the new house we purchased. Yes, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are making themselves at home in our new place as if it's their own. Even if it's a family member's purchase, spending every day relaxing in a married couple's home seems to lack common sense. Furthermore, they don't hesitate to open the fridge to grab a beer. I find myself constantly dealing with the frustration of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's behavior, which seems to have crossed all reasonable limits. They have taken it upon themselves to consume all the food I bought, intended to last for a week. Despite Ryan's repeated warnings, they continue to ignore any sense of restraint. Dinner, snacks, and even the beer are not spared. After devouring everything, they leave unwashed dishes in the sink and take showers at our house. Once they've completed this routine, they casually return to their own home. I can't help but wonder if they are facing difficulties, such as a lack of food or essential utilities like gas, electricity, or water. Thoughts like these cross my mind as I attempt to quell the irritation building up within me. Every opportunity they get, they extol the virtues of our new house, making themselves entirely at home each day. The frequency of their visits is taking a toll on us, and even Ryan is visibly upset. We've tried locking the door and pretending not to be home, hoping to discourage their daily intrusion. However, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have resorted to causing a scene right outside the house. Concerned about the judgment of our new neighbors, we'd eventually relent and let them in. Although calling the police has crossed our minds, we hesitate to become the talk of the neighborhood. To our dismay, their visits have only grown more prolonged. Perhaps, in part, it's our fault for not being assertive enough. The daily intrusion has become unbearable, making me feel sick. My father-in-law suggests they go and relax at Ryan's place, indicating it's too noisy with the two of us around. Ironically, if they are aware of their noise, I wish they would show some consideration. On a particularly frustrating day, Ryan's late hours at work exacerbate the situation. My mother-in-law, ever intrusive, questions when I'll allow her to hold her grandchild. She bluntly labels a daughter-in-law who can't have children as a failure, intruding on sensitive issues, even within the confines of my own home. The stress was overwhelming, not to mention the constant disturbance from their late-night presence. With the noise they brought into our lives, the idea of even contemplating having children seemed like a distant dream. I wondered if they were aware of the impact their words had on us. While rummaging through the fridge was somewhat bearable, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had recently escalated their intrusive behavior. Whenever I went to the bathroom or diverted my attention to chores, they would delve into my closet and meddle with my bags and accessories. Their audacity reached a new level when they attempted to take my wallet and stroll outside. "Susan, what are you doing? That's my wallet," I exclaimed in shock, taking it back. They responded nonchalantly, claiming they needed to buy liquor and expecting me to foot the bill. It was an absurd demand, and I firmly asserted that if they wanted to drink, they should use their own money. This encounter left them furious, insisting that it was only natural for me, Jennifer, to bear all the costs and entertain them. I couldn't comprehend their entitlement. If their visits were infrequent, I might have understood, but their intrusion had become a daily affair. Despite my wallet being unharmed, their behavior terrified me. To prevent a repeat, I started hiding my wallet where they couldn't find it, but they persisted in scouring the house whenever I looked away. I confronted them, expressing how their actions were beyond acceptable, but they responded with hostility, telling me to shut up and asserting that I, as a mere daughter-in-law, had no right to talk back. This continued until I fell ill. When Ryan's work finally allowed for a discussion, his anger erupted like a volcano. "What the hell are you two doing? Don't ever come to this house again. Get out," he thundered. Whether intimidated or scared, they left quietly that day. However, a lingering unease settled within me as I noticed a strange smile on their faces while departing. Something felt off, and it was deeply unsettling. 3 days have passed since we kicked out my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. The silence is a relief, and finally we can live without stress. Ryan and I, for the first time in a while, enjoyed an affectionate and stress-free time together. Just as we were reveling in this newfound tranquility, Ryan's phone rang, and his expression changed significantly after the call ended. I attempted to inquire about the call, but Ryan was gazing into space, seemingly lost in thought. His demeanor indicated something serious had happened. An overwhelming sense of anxiety washed over me. When Ryan finally spoke, what he revealed surpassed my worst imagination. It was the credit card company. My credit card had been fraudulently used. "What do you mean someone is using it?" I asked, startled. "It seems about $30,000 has been used," Ryan explained, his words leaving me astounded. "Fraudulently used in Florida," he continued. "Florida? Why Florida?" Ryan never carried his wallet on workdays, and he didn't engage in online shopping, making the situation even more perplexing. We were at a loss, unable to comprehend how this could have happened. "I've asked the credit card company to freeze the card for now," Ryan added, his frustration evident. While grappling with the implications, my phone rang. Glancing at the caller ID, it was the worst possible timing, a call from my mother-in-law. The incessant ringing irritated me, and though they were unaware of our situation, I felt the same way Ryan did. Ignoring the call didn't deter her persistence. Frustrated, I decided to answer. "Jennifer, what have you done?" Her voice was so loud I thought it might break my eardrums. It was not the time to be yelled at, and in an attempt to keep Ryan informed, I put her on speaker. Maintaining my composure, I questioned her incessant calls. Ignoring my inquiry, she exclaimed, "You stopped the credit card, didn't you? Now I can't use it. How are you going to fix this?" I was taken aback. "Wait, freeze the credit card? How does she know about that?" Suspicion crept in, and I asked if, by any chance, she was in Florida. "Yes, I'm in Florida. I'm on vacation with Susan, using my leave." "Why would you ask that? More importantly, why did you stop the credit card?" she replied. With those words, the situation became painfully clear. The culprits who had stolen and used the credit card were none other than my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. A mix of shock and dismay left us both speechless. "I noticed the wallet in your purse when you went to the bathroom the other day, so I just took the credit card, lol. After you kicked us out, we came straight to Florida." As angry as we were, not only did they do as they pleased in someone else's home, but what they did was the lowest of human actions. Ryan and I could no longer contain our anger. "Listen, Mother, even if we're family, taking and using someone else's credit card is a clear crime," I spoke with trembling anger. "What are you talking about? Lol. A crime? It's just using my daughter-in-law's credit card for a bit. Why would that be a crime? You're overreacting. We're family. It should be fine." My mother-in-law laughed dismissively. "Wait, she took and used my credit card?" For a moment, I thought I had misheard and looked at Ryan in confusion. It seemed that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were both under the impression that the credit cards they took from the bag were mine. "Since it's Jennifer's credit card, I thought I'd use it to my heart's content, you know," my mother-in-law added with a tone that made it clear she had taken full advantage of what she thought was the opportunity. But why did she believe it was my credit card? As I pondered this, she added something even more appalling. "This is a good chance to teach you something. A daughter-in-law's money is my money. You married into our family, so it's only natural, right? You'll be paying the full amount for what we've used here. So when will the credit card be ready for you to use?" I was shocked by her brazen words and decided to ask her a question. Did you check the name on that credit card?" "Huh? What are you talking about?" "That's what I'm asking. Did you look at the name that's written on the card?" Just as I was thinking she shouldn't make me repeat myself, the loud and unpleasant voice of my mother-in-law quieted down. "Wait, this is Ryan's credit card. Why? How can that be?" Finally, she realized that the credit card wasn't mine but belonged to her son, Ryan. I could hear my mother-in-law and sister-in-law panicking over the phone. "Why is it Ryan's credit card? I took it from your wallet." To clarify the confusion for my mother-in-law, I explained, "Oh, didn't you know Ryan and I have matching wallets?" "What? Why would you do that?" "Indeed, my husband and I often have matching items, sometimes in different colors, but usually they are the same. That's why Ryan's wallet is identical to mine. But I took the wallet from your bag." "So why is Ryan's wallet in your bag?" Patiently and kindly, I explained to my flustered mother-in-law. "Ryan doesn't usually carry his wallet on work days, but he does when we go out on a date. Whenever we go out together, he always ends up carrying my bag. I prefer to carry my own things, but he insists, saying it would be too heavy for me, and takes it from my hands. When there are many things to carry, a bag becomes a nuisance, so he doesn't bring one. Naturally, Ryan's wallet ends up in my bag since he doesn't carry a wallet to work. It usually stays in my bag." Hearing my explanation, my mother-in-law muttered discontentedly over the phone. For the record, I had hidden my wallet in a place they wouldn't find it because of their previous actions. So, the only wallet in my bag was Ryan's. Moreover, I had hidden the bag containing Ryan's wallet deep in the closet too. Their determination to find it was relentless. It's a big problem that they rummage through bags and take out credit cards, but even more so that they use them without checking whose name is on them. I can hear my mother-in-law repeatedly saying, "But I thought it was Jennifer's wallet." You wouldn't think it's Ryan's wallet, would you? If I had known it was Ryan's credit card from the start, I wouldn't have used it. No, why is it that my credit card could be used but not Ryan's? That logic didn't make sense to me, so I asked. I would never use my dear son's credit card. But you, on the other hand, are just an obstacle to me, so I thought it didn't matter how much I use. Upon hearing this despicable reasoning, Ryan lashed out at his mother. "How can you do something so low to the person I love most?" The mother-in-law retorted with, "What do you mean by most beloved? And you're my precious son." It seemed she didn't understand the concept of letting go. Ryan calmly steered the conversation back to the main issue. "You guys took someone's credit card and used it without permission. Pay back the full amount." Hearing his words, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law began screaming so much that my cell phone nearly broke from the howling. Then my sister-in-law began to argue with Ryan. "We obviously don't have that kind of money. What are you thinking, asking for such an impossible thing? You say to pay it back, but we're stuck here because you stopped the credit card. Truly careless. Why would they travel around without buying return tickets?" Just thinking about how they intended to freely use someone else's credit card filled me with dread. Ryan seemed to be beyond anger, looking completely drained of strength. Then, my mother-in-law continued with something incomprehensible. "If you want the full amount back, wire the money to my bank account right now. Oh, and include some for us to have fun with. Will you wait a minute? Why do we have to wire the money if we want the full amount back?" Their thought process was beyond my common sense. It wasn't just illogical. It seemed insane. "Why are you silent? Wire the money now. We can't get back home. Is that okay with you?" They shouldn't have been apologetic for their mistake, but for some reason, they were acting brazen. Ryan couldn't take it anymore and yelled at the two. "Are you insane? There's no way I'm wiring the money. How can you even say that? Figure it out yourselves and come back." Ryan's voice was low and filled with authority and volume. It must have been scary because the two of them finally fell silent. We added more pressure on them. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? It seems like you've been causing trouble for Ryan and the others." A voice interrupted. "What are you doing here?" As it turned out, while I was dealing with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Ryan had contacted his father to report the situation. Then, a surprising truth came to light. "Didn't you invite these two?" I was told. I wasn't inviting them because I had work. They had apparently told my father-in-law that we had invited them. Of course, that wasn't true, and Ryan explained everything that had happened. Upon hearing the truth, my father-in-law was outraged, and while still connected to my mother-in-law's phone, he rushed over to our house. No, you see, that's not it. Listen to me, please. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were flustered, making incomprehensible excuses, clearly more frightened than when Ryan had yelled at them. I don't want to hear any excuses. We're getting a divorce, and Susan, at your age, how can you not be ashamed of what you're doing? You must leave the house. From my father-in-law's mouth came talk of divorce and being kicked out. Ryan and I exchanged surprised glances at these unexpected words. What? You're joking, right? This divorce talk, it's a lie, right? At this point, do you think I'm lying? Once you get back, sign the divorce papers, pack your things, and leave right away. You could tell they were hit hard by his words. I couldn't help but think serves them right. To my father-in-law's response, not just my father-in-law, Ryan further cornered my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Don't think you can even come to my house either. If you come again, I don't care how much noise you make or what the neighbors think. I won't hesitate to call the police. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law lost their words upon hearing what my father-in-law and Ryan said. They must have been deeply affected. Why are the $30,000 you wired to my bank account in one lump sum? If I can't confirm the transfer by the deadline, you'll have to deal with the police and a lawyer. Upon hearing this, my sister-in-law hurriedly wired the money. Ryan called to confirm the transfer and shouted, "If you had that amount available, you should have traveled with your own money." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were trembling and apologizing over the phone. When Ryan tried to hang up, it seems like the two were apologizing and saying various pleas. Ryan decided to have no further contact and promptly blocked my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's numbers. Afterwards, my father-in-law apologized for not managing the two properly. I'm truly sorry. If only I had watched over them more properly, I would have noticed sooner. Ryan assured my father-in-law that he had done nothing wrong. No, Dad, you've done nothing wrong, so please don't apologize. He asked his father, who was still apologizing, to stop. With my mother-in-law and sister-in-law no longer visiting the house, our lives finally returned to peace. As for how my mother-in-law and sister-in-law managed to return home, it seems my sister-in-law used her own money to buy their tickets. They should have used their own money for the trip from the start, but they complained about not wanting to spend their savings. The worst part was hearing them say, "We wanted to use Jennifer's credit card for fun." Their characters were too twisted. In the end, they lost everything. Upon returning from Florida, they continued to apologize to my father-in-law, saying they regretted their actions. But his anger did not subside, and he promptly kicked them out, shouting, "Never cross my threshold again." My mother-in-law and sister-in-law shamelessly came to our house too, but when Ryan told them through the intercom, "I warned you. I will call the police," they ran away. Seeing that, we laughed so hard. With nowhere else to go, my mother-in-law reluctantly lived in a hotel, but having to repay about $30,000 along with the expenses in Florida and the airfare for returning home, their savings dwindled, and they began looking for a house. The cheap apartment they finally found was in terrible shape, with thin walls that would earn them knocks from the next room at even the slightest noise. Life in such a stressful environment led to accumulated stress. As a result, they became irritable over trivial matters, and it seems their arguments never ceased. Eventually, my sister-in-law shouted at my mother-in-law, "Why should I be the only one paying? Get out!" And so, my mother-in-law left. My mother-in-law visited relatives, but the story of their deeds had already spread. Consequently, with the impression of being thieves and insensitive, she was continuously turned away. Having left my sister-in-law's place on bad terms, my mother-in-law could not return and had to find a place on her own. Now living in an apartment even worse than the one she shared with my sister-in-law, though it was their own doing, my mother-in-law now works all day to scrape by, leading lonely lives without financial or emotional comfort. Amidst this, something wonderful happened for us. We finally conceived the child we had been longing for. My poor health and severe nausea were all because of the pregnancy. Now, in the stable period, I'm feeling settled. Occasionally, we invite my father-in-law over to spend joyous, laughter-filled time together. We can hardly